are into the fourth episode on legal aspects of a data breach. And to have this conversation, I have my special guest, Thanuki. And she's been very kind to, walk us through various aspects by defining is data breach. And then she also gave us examples in the second episode about the data loss incidents. And in the third episode, she spoke about the third-party data exposures and what that means. And today we are going to be talking about unsolicited use of breached data. And one of the examples which comes to the top of my mind, Tanuki, is typically when somebody tenders their resignation or when they have making up their mind, okay, I should be leaving this organization. They are now collecting all this data or backing it up. And when they leave the organization, they're taking this data. So going back to our definition, we said this is unauthorized access and exfiltration of data. And now they have taken an organization's data where they were gainfully employed, and now they are going to misuse it or use it to gain out of it. So that's one example, and I'm sure you would have several other examples. So I'd invite you to, share your thoughts on this.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Thanuki.
All right. So great. So today's question is basically on unsolicited use of data, accessing it and doing something with it. I think something that I remember as a good example for this was the Ashley Madison data breach, which occurred a couple of years ago, I think 2015 or so. So there was a Netflix documentary also on this, which is very interesting. So if
Let's post the link at the bottom of the video for the Netflix documentary.
So if anybody has some time, it'd be good for them to watch it. So this was about 36 million users of the Ashley Madison website was affected by this. What essentially happened here was it is a Canadian site, which was it was proving to be quite controversial. It was catering for happily married people looking for a discreet affair to essentially have that. And, all of a sudden, this information became
public.
Imagine the impact of that on not just the people, and most of these people who were using also people with high profiles, if you were to look at it at the time, and it was this particular breach was investigated into by watchdogs in Canada and Australia. It took data of millions of users. And the problem behind this was absent security. And there was a report that was released soon after that, where they were talking about how privacy breaches are a core risk for any organization with a business model that is based on the collection and use of personal information. And the bigger problem with a situation like the Ashley Madison incident is that the impact of this is not just to that individual per se, but here it goes beyond that. It also extends to the families, and if there are children, it extends onto that. And it's a stark reminder that for any organization working with private information of people, is that you, especially if you're supporting certain requirements such as this of the Ashley Madison situation, that you need to see that there are other stakeholders in this conversation that need to be kept in mind. And that is also the reason why steps need to be taken to prevent such data breaches from happening, because the impact is large. It does not apply to one person or that person's reputation, ultimately, at the end of the day. We're looking at this aspect of your choice to live your life the way you like or the way you please, but at the same time, we need to also recognize that data is pretty much lifeblood that powers so many aspects of our life. And that is where this idea of unsolicited data access and use comes into play. And also adding on to what you said in the beginning about employees taking their data with them. This is something that has always bothered me, is that there are some places that don't really go through a proper process of making sure that access that you had while you were at your workplace is taken away from you when you leave. I mean, I'm all for good faith, but we have to also understand that these are human beings, right?
Absolutely.
And when you look at when you look at it properly, it all boils down to basic survival. Sometimes it makes a lot of sense for people to keep have a hold on some of this information. Maybe it could be to be a better competitor from the other company that you're applying to, right? Uh, so people are going to keep access to that. I mean, and they will look at that, once in a way. They'll use it to their advantage. There's nothing
Mhm.
stopping that from happening. And that reminds us that as a part of your processes, just like there are some companies in Sri Lanka now that actually have exit interviews, it has to also extend to having a proper mechanism to remove access to all that data that you generally have access to. That's very important, because I would think, I mean, there's definitely no room for second guessing things once things actually go the wrong way when it comes to
Absolutely.
data breach.
Okay, and then also, I mean, I could give you a couple of other examples as well. And I've come across cases where employees have uploaded internal data which they have worked on to demonstrate their ability to perform in the prospective employer's
Yeah,
place, right? So, as part of the interviewing process, they have actually exfiltrated data and exported it to a potential employer. So
yeah,
the potential employer in this instance has been a predator. He has actually used an interviewing technique to get that data out.
yeah,
Right. So from a legal situation, it can be very, very uh, complex. Right. And also we see, people are probably taking those data and probably using it for marketing purposes or even blackmail for that matter.
correct.
Right. So I think the ownership still lies with the organization to grant access on a need to know, need to do basis,
Yes.
least privilege principles. And I think that's what we talk about when we talk about the data privacy or the cybersecurity or information security frameworks. So it
Yeah.
is very important for, yeah, go ahead, Tanuki,
Yeah,
you were trying to say
and
something.
it just came to my mind this very recently. There was an instance where an employee, a disgruntled employee, released a whole bunch of recipes of Starbucks, on online. It was everywhere. It was on Twitter. It was everywhere. And these are also unsolicited users. I mean, this person has not even been removed from the workplace. So it shows us that if that is possible while you are already there, that, you know, then you need to be thinking about what it means to make sure that your access control aspects are in place properly.
Absolutely. And extending this, when you look at the misconfiguration, is an example you gave in one of the previous episodes, right? So accidental exposure or accidental misconfiguration of controls would also give rise to a bad actor gaining access to this information. And then they can actually be using that information to profit out of it,
Correct.
either directly or indirectly. They could probably take that data, sell it to somebody else, to a data broker, and the data broker probably would use it in different forms to make monetary gains. And I think there are umpteen number of examples which actually can be talked under this category of unsolicited use of breached data.
Yeah.
Any concluding thoughts on that, Tamiki, before we wrap up the session for this one?
Um, no, I mean, I just want to maybe add 2 points from the laws in Sri Lanka, so just to get
Sure.
an idea of unsolicited use. So if you take the Computer Crimes Act, now this is an old act. It came in 2007. There haven't been any amendments to this act or anything that changes the way it is interpreted. So we can say that the interpretation is quite narrow, but at the same time, there is ample space for you to use this in situations like this when it comes to this conversation on unsolicited use of data. So, like for example, I think like Section 7, Section 10, it makes it an offense to disclose information that is entrusted for computer access without authority or in the breach of a contract. And that can apply to publishing or using breach data which involves a misuse of privileged access. It doesn't state that in those explicit terms, but when you read it and you read it a couple of times over and over, you can see that it's vague enough to interpret it as broadly as you like, I would think.
Absolutely. I would
So
guess so. Yes.
that is there. I mean, I would think that the Computer Crimes Act, in my view, the Computer Crimes Act, even though it doesn't mention artificial intelligence, I think that you can interpret that as well if you want to apply to artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. It's broad enough to include that. That's what I would
Not
say.
enough to do it. Okay, so that
Exactly.
is something that we need to keep in mind, and especially because this includes a fine and also imprisonment. This
Correct.
is an act which has been there for a while. It is being used. It is brought up in courts. It is something that people need to keep in mind at all times, uh, whenever they are trying to do something with data that they have got their hands on.
Correct.
And we may have our reservations about the way certain laws are or the way they are worded. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that is the law of our country. We need to,
Correct.
we need
Which you
to,
need to respect.
you need to respect it, and you need to understand how these come to play. Saying I don't understand the law, I don't know it, I haven't read it, is not an excuse in Sri Lanka. So that's something, or anywhere basically. But
Anywhere in the world, yes.
yeah, so that's something we need to keep in mind. And
Correct.
also, at the point when the Data Protection Act comes into play, there too, uh, we are looking at giving significant value to the sanctity of a data subject's rights. And even in that situation, the conversation on unsolicited use of data is going to really pop up. And including, it's not just that, it's also general unsolicited working with data. Like, for example, unsolicited messaging, when you keep on getting messages from companies which you've never subscribed for,
Right.
okay, where you use data to basically annoy and harass people. You have provisions in that act to support you, because the sanctity of a data subject is being upheld by that. So these
Correct.
are two acts I would focus on at this point. Controversial or not, you have the Online Safety Act as well at your disposal. It's something that um, you need to, I would think it's something that you need to read a couple of times and see what are the applications of an act like that as well. I mean, if you're ever thinking of using it. So I thought it would be good to add a few points on the existing
No,
laws.
absolutely. Those are very valuable points, Tanuki, because it's important for people to know what remedies are out there for them and how they should actually structure their internal operations so that they don't have to use the laws, right? I mean, I would say the last place anybody would want to go is the police station and the courtrooms, right?
Yes.
So if they do what they need to do and do it right, and I think they can actually avoid going into the courtrooms and spending hours and hours fighting a case, because some of these cases are not going to end in an hour, right? It
Yeah.
may just prolong for several days or maybe months and years, right? So,
If you
so
properly, I would think that if you properly look into these laws, you will see that they hint at and they give you certain nuances as to how you need to um, kind of prepare yourself for
correct,
certain consequences, right? How you can
absolutely
avoid them. It may not
correct,
be said in explicit terms, but as you read it, it will give you an idea. And I think our laws are capable of doing that. So,
absolutely. And also, Tanuki, I mean, we did mention about some of the use cases or the cases which have happened in other countries, right? I mean, one case which actually is top of my mind right now is the Ashley Madison case, right?
yes,
What's the learning there? Or if you take the Verizon, or when you take about the Equifax cases, right?
yeah,
So what is that we should be doing right so that we don't have to face the same issue which actually happened to those? So one of the aspects I would say is that the organizations not only need to understand the laws, but also build their policy framework to address these.
yeah,
Number one. Then number two is continuous awareness. You need to continuously educate the users. You can't do this as a what do you call like a religious activity, you do it once a year, or like celebrating Christmas or whatever, right? And I'm just saying, so you need to keep continuously reinforce these thoughts into the people and say, hey guys, these are things you should be doing, and anything you do away from this is going to be a violation, and you're going to be penalized for that.
Yeah.
And I think that messaging, both for internal people and also the organizations which are part of the ecosystem, the supply chain, the third parties, and even the customers, they need to know what we
Yeah.
would do in case of a situation, right?
Yes. And I would just add that
Yeah,
responses, we need to be proactive, not
absolutely.
reactive. Because
Correct.
in Sri Lanka, we have a tendency of being reactive when it comes to anything and everything, and that's not really the way to go about it. Because the consequences and basically what you have to face in the aftermath of an incident, especially when it comes to a data breach, is not, then it's not going to be easy to fix that. So it's always
Absolutely.
best, it's always good for your health and the health of your organization to be as proactive as possible and preempt as much
Yeah.
as possible.
I think we're in the era of AI, artificial intelligence, and today everybody is talking about digital resilience. So, in the era of AI and in the era of digital resilience, you cannot be reactive.
Yeah.
You've got to be proactive, right? So, you've got to preempt. So, with that note, Tanuki, I'm going to wind up this session for today. And when we come back, we will talk about what should someone do in the event of a data breach. Right? So our conversation is going to be on breach notification requirements. And based on the various laws what we have across around the world, Tanuki would just shed some insights into what are the best practices. So Tanuki, thank you so much again. I can't thank you enough for spending time and talking at length about all these topics which you have spoken. And this is the fourth episode. And when we come back, we will be talking about breach notification requirements in episode 5. Thank you so much. Thank you.